Hi everyone, Adrian from Audio Excellence Canada. Hope you're all doing well. This is take 2 because the guys screwed up on take 1. My team on crack. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well. This is going to be my first impressions of the Sonus Faber SE-17. So this is the speaker behind me, and on this side you'll see the AIDA if it catches in the frame. Also, to let you know, I just finished an interview with the designer Paolo Tezzon from Sonus Faber, and that should be uploaded once we finish editing in maybe a week or so. We'll probably do it in 3 parts because it's a pretty long interview. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. I'm going to start first with the technical specifications. The speakers are 3.5 way with a sound field shaper module in the back of the speaker. Jerry will show some pictures or a video roll of what it looks like. The sound field shaper in the back is adjustable, and again, he'll show you that. Frequency response is rated at 18 to 36 kilohertz, 4 ohms, 92 dB sensitivity. The dimensions are 1750 high by 750 wide by 785 millimeters deep. 68.8 inches high, 29.5 inches wide, and 31 inches deep. 307 kilograms each net weight. That's the speaker without packaging, or 676 pounds each. That's like 3 times what Jerry weighs. And Jerry is a strong, big, muscular guy. Tweeters are 130 millimeter or 1.1 inch D.L.C, as the factory calls it, which is diamond-like carbon deposited over a beryllium dome tweeter. The mid-range is 180 millimeters or 7.1 inch driver using natural fibers, paper, pulp. The woofer, there are 2 woofers front-facing, 2 by 260 millimeters or 10 inch. It's a sandwich cone where the middle is a high-tech syntactic foam core, and then on the top and the bottom surfaces are cellulose, paper, pulp surface. 3-inch voice coil, so the woofers can really move. Subwoofer, which is mounted on the side, there's a 380 millimeters or 15 inch with 4-inch voice coils, so it can really move. Sonically, this is perhaps the most neutral Sonus Faber I've ever encountered, and I've been a fan since almost day one. Early Sonus Fabers, when the original founder was designing them, tended to be very warm, certainly very musical, but very warm, dynamically a little bit limited. Wonderfully musical speakers if you listen to small ensembles, light jazz, vocals, violin concertos, that kind of thing. But anything that was more demanding, anything with dynamics, bass, power, R&B, wasn't necessarily the best choice, especially if you wanted something tonally a little bit more neutral. These, on the other hand, are very neutral. I would say very neutral. Perhaps, well, when we do a further, deeper impressions of the speaker, I'll try to think of speakers that it sort of sounds like. For now, certainly the most neutral Sonus Faber I've ever heard. And yet it still has a tinge of the warmth, especially in the mid-range, just a little bit, not like the regular Sonus Fabers. Let me start first with perhaps the thing that you will notice almost immediately: incredible leading-edge transients. If you've ever heard an electrostatic speaker like a Martin Logan, even the quads, you will hear clarity that you've never heard before, top to bottom. The difference is that with these speakers, you hear the clarity, but you also have the body. Imagine a guitar and not just the strings. You also have the body of the guitar as well. And that's what these sound like. Whether you pluck it or you strum it or you play hard on the strings, you hear all that. You hear the details of the frets, you hear the fingering. It's all there in detail. And yet again, with not the typical beryllium hardness or tilt up high frequency that I typically hear with beryllium, and even with some diamond dome tweeters, ceramics as well. These, I don't get that, and maybe it's because the crossover is high enough that the tweeter just adds that sense of leading edge and airiness, and yet the mid-range, which handles most of the important core of the sound that we hear, doesn't have that characteristic. As I say, speed is incredible, articulation, detail, transparency. If you ever get a chance to hear these speakers, I highly recommend it. Soundstage, the scale is huge. It's as big perhaps as any speaker I've ever heard. Maybe not quite as big as the XVX. In fact, I would say definitely not as big as the XVX. But again, I'll get into the comparisons in another video. Soundstage is as wide as the speakers, and definitely wider if the recording has that. Depth, I find, is only limited to the recording itself. Now, the speakers are approximately 2.5 feet or so from the back of the speaker to the wall behind it. So it's not pulled out as far as some systems or some rooms allow for the speakers to go, and that's basically because of our room. Our room is 4, 8, 12, roughly about 18 or so feet this way, which is where the speakers are facing. So I can't really pull them as much as I'd like to. If you've got a let me talk about this part. Yesterday I was having a conversation with a client about this particular part. There are some speakers and some instances where you've heard speakers have tremendous sense of depth, which is a wonderful illusion if you can do it. But oftentimes that's because the speakers are pulled very far away from the wall behind the speakers. And when you do that, the sensation of detachment is and can be incredible. However, I don't believe that that's actually in the recording. And that's because when you listen to the actual backstage of a recording, like a really well recorded classical piece of music, it's not that the depth is so much further back. It's just that the whole stage is moved from where the plane of the speakers are backwards. So it's more laid back. So you get the sensation of depth. With a well-recorded piece of music, I can hear the depth very clearly where it goes all the way to the back. Maybe not quite as sensational as I say, if the speakers are fully pulled out further. However, if you do enjoy even deeper sense of ambience and depth and airiness, the back of the speaker allows you to adjust for that. So there's an actual depth control, 1 to 5, as well as off, and also an azimuth adjustment for the sound field shaper enclosure, so you can get more sensation of ambience. Image. This is something that, again, will immediately strike you. When you're listening to speakers and you're listening to just a single voice or even multiple voices, it doesn't matter. They are totally detached from the speaker. There's no sense at all that you're hearing the sound coming from the speaker at all. And this is a wonderful thing that they've been able to achieve, especially given the width of the speaker. A lot of times when you hear very, very sharp imaging, it's oftentimes due to the narrow baffle of a speaker. So if you've ever heard a speaker that's very narrow and it's baffled, you will find that the sharpness of the image is really good. With these speakers, to give you an idea, the width of the speaker is almost 30 inches, 29.5 inches, and yet they image like nobody's business. Total detachment. The other thing also to note, if you've ever listened to say a singer that has very, very wide range from upper bass all the way up to, say, falsetto, you might find that with some speakers that as the person goes lower in range, that his voice starts spreading apart. And then when he goes up, it's more focused. With these speakers, I don't find that at all. Same with the Wilsons. I get a very sharp image from top to bottom. That the blend between the drivers is incredibly good. Now, in terms of the tonality, for me, the most important thing has always been the mid-range, because the mid-range covers most of the sound that the recordings tend to have. And so the mid-range is really, really important. These have the same magical, beautiful mid-range that Sonus Faber is known for. You may not like Sonus Faber because the highs may not be as brilliant, or may not be as articulate, or may not be as bright, or may not have the same kind of transient response that other speakers using metal type dome tweeters might have. But the mid-range is something that Sonus Faber is just truly magical. And these are the best that Sonus Faber has ever done. Highs, definitely, as I mentioned earlier, more airy, more brilliant, better leading edge, more transient sense than the normal Sonus Fabers that use the silk dome tweeter. So I actually really like this. What's interesting is that, as I mentioned earlier, typically with beryllium dome tweeters, I don't generally like them. In fact, I can't think of any speaker that uses a beryllium dome that I've enjoyed long term. Initially, for the first 5-6 minutes, it's wonderful to hear that sensation of speed and airiness and clarity. But I find myself getting a little bit fatigued over a longer listen, especially with the kind of music that I listen to, which ranges from very simple to very, very complex dance music, R&B, and so on. I don't find myself getting fatigued with these speakers. And our room is not particularly well damped. It's got a couple of curtains, a couple of diffusers and carpet, but otherwise it's mostly bare walls. And yet I don't find myself getting fatigued listening to the speakers. Bass is extended, powerful, articulate, and probably more importantly, controlled and blended with the rest of the frequency response. One of the challenges that I've found in the past with speakers that are capable of low frequency, very low frequency, is control. There are speakers that we've tested, that we've returned, that I've bought, that I've subsequently sold, because while the bass measures low, there's no articulation and there's no control. There's no sense of tightness. There's no sense of start and stop. It's just like a poor home theater subwoofer. The Wilsons have always, for me, done wonderful bass and articulate and deep and powerful. And now I can say I can add the SE-17s to that list. Again, I won't give away all of my sonic impressions because I haven't done enough listening. But while the XVX goes lower and has more energy and articulation in the lowest frequencies, these are a good second in my experience. And by the way, visceral. Not only does it go low, there are a number of speakers that can go low when provoked, but they never send enough, they don't usually move enough air that viscerally, physically shakes you. These can. A couple other things that I will be doing to try and optimize the speakers even more. When the movers moved the speakers into the room, we had a good sense of where we wanted the speakers. What we ended up doing was having the subwoofers, the big 15-inch woofers, facing towards the center of the room. So in other words, the woofers are facing each other. What I like to do is move the speakers, swap them so that the bass faces towards the side walls, and see whether or not I get better response, better bass, and so on. I also want to try angling the speakers, in other words, adjusting the toe-in angle, because right now the speakers are only toed in a little bit. I want to try and toe in a little bit more and see what happens with that. Also, I want to play with the adjustments in the back to see if I can get even better sound, even better illusion. As it is right now, the illusion is wonderful. I want to see if I can do more. And then last but not least, I want to play with cables and electronics. our default was to use the McIntosh MC901s. And for those of you who don't know about the MC901, Jerry will link I think we did 2 videos about them. One was the unboxing and the other one was our sonic impressions of the amplifier. The MC901 is unique, possibly in the world, in that it's a monoblock, but within each monoblock there are actually 2 amplifiers. There's a 600 watt solid state amplifier, and then I think there's a 300 watt tube amplifier. So what we've done is we're using the solid state part to drive the bass, and then the tube part to drive the mid-range and high frequencies. And also on the amplifier there are a number of controls to allow you to adjust the crossover frequency and the gain. So we've set the crossover frequency at 250, which is what the speakers are crossed over at. And I'd like to play with them first a little bit more, listen to them a little bit more. Our amps haven't really been broken in very much, so I'd like to play them a little bit more and let them break in. And then I want to try the D'Agostinos that we've got and see what that sounds like. And then I would also like to play with cables. We're currently using Nordos Valhallas to drive the speakers. I want to also compare it with our top AudioQuest cables and then get a sense of what that does to the sound. The rest of the components, we're using MSB discrete DAC and the McIntosh C1100 preamplifier, and we're using Roon Nucleus as our Roon core and feeding that into the MSB discrete. Anyway, so that's my first impressions. Hopefully this gives you a bit of an idea of what the speakers sound like. And then finally I want to address a couple of questions that we've received on our initial unboxing video, which again Jerry will also link in the description box. One of the questions was why haven't we, or why won't we use other electronics? Well, we will, as I mentioned earlier. We just decided to start with the McIntosh first. And the second question I wanted to address was the cost of the speakers. I get it. It's an extremely expensive speaker, just like the Wilson XVXs, just like a whole bunch of other stuff that we sell. Lots of the stuff that we sell is very, very expensive. But the truth is, if your friends come over to your house and you've got a $5,000 stereo system, they would still think that that's very expensive as well, because for them, it's just not all that important. So cost is one factor. Now, can I justify 250,000 US dollars? Yes and no. I can't in terms of the materials cost. No, I can't. As somebody pointed out, does it come with bathrooms and bedrooms? No, it doesn't. But if I were to look at it from the standpoint of, I love my music. I would much rather have a great audio system than a great car, and I've been fortunate enough to have wonderful, very expensive cars. I would still always default to a great audio system versus a great car. And because for me, being able to have my favorite musicians play for me anytime I want, anytime that I need a pickup, anytime that I feel sad, depressed, or I want to feel joy and I can put it on, a great system does something for me that goes into my soul and lifts me, that I don't get the same kind of response from a wonderful car or from a big house or from any other passions that I may have. So for me, spending the money, if that's what it does for me, spending the money in that sense, I can justify it. Same with the Wilson XVX, as I mentioned, I bought them. So again, I cannot justify to somebody else. All I can say is that I can justify it for myself, and obviously for our clients as well. They buy it. So hopefully that answers some of the questions. And as always, if you have questions, comments, feedbacks, please leave them in the video. I always read every one of your comments, and whenever I get a chance, I try to respond as well. And also, please thumbs up, thumbs down, doesn't matter to us. We just like the fact that you're giving us feedback, and share and subscribe and turn on the notification so that the next video that comes up, you'll be notified. As always, we're really grateful that you watch our videos, because some of you may not know, but the funds that we get from YouTube, we match, and then we donate the funds to charity. So in our case, it's the Salvation Army, although I've also been donating to other charities as well. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and see you again. Bye-bye.